Even this techno enthusiast believes that one of the most exciting trends that we've seen recently is this unprecedented emphasis on human behavior. Mine started about 6 years ago at a conference on the science of climate change, and one of the speakers happened to note that less than 1/2% of all the federal R&D on climate was based on social sciences. And so the light went off, and I thought, well, no wonder we've had such difficulty learning how to explain this science, or learning how to convey the benefits of taking action and the risks in ways that people value and understand. So it's terrific to see this emphasis, even on your agenda, a number of good sessions dealing with the human occupant and human behavior, the psychology, or to hear facility managers really sharing ideas on overcoming the single biggest obstacle to energy use in buildings, and that's the human occupant. And this is only underscored, of course, by the emphasis on zero energy buildings, where the human factor can be accountable for about 50% of the remaining load. It's revealing, I think, also to see how behavior is playing out in other fields. Take medicine. In 2008, Dr. Peter Pronovost, who's now with Johns Hopkins, was awarded a MacArthur Genius Award and featured on Time magazine as one of the most influential people on the planet. What was his innovation? It wasn't technology, it was a simple 5-point checklist that consisted of washing hands, having sanitized bandages and covers for patients, sanitized clothing for the medical staff. None of these concepts were new. So much had been written about this for years. But his genius came in taking all of that information and identifying the 5 most important things, and then putting it in a way that would be replicable and usable. His genius was designing for human behavior. Now, you would think that hospitals all across the country would leap at adopting that, but not so much, not so fast. And some follow-up research found why. Human factors again. Nurses didn't feel empowered to challenge doctors. Doctors felt that perhaps checklists were fine for pilots before taking off, but not necessarily useful for them. And it really took a lot of things to come together, including increased transparency in hospitals and some toolkits that were devised to make change happen, that it took off. So if ever we would underestimate the importance of human behavior in the energy field, boy, you just look at medicine and it would cure you, where so many lives are literally on the line each and every day. Even in the specific case of checklists, by the way, it was shortly after reading about Dr. Pronovost that I saw my first article by 2 psychologists explaining why those lists of 50 things you can do to cut energy use, or 1,000 ways that you can save the planet, why they just don't work with human beings because of the way our mind works. That is far more important than to isolate a few of the most important and maybe sort them by cost or easiness to do. I credit a lot of this new focus on design thinking to a firm called IDEO. Maybe you've heard of it. Creator of the first mousetop for Steve Jobs, Apple, and so many other products. And more recently, for extending their kind of design thinking to public and private sector use of services, including designing of sanitary water delivery systems in poor developing countries. IDEO's CDO identified 4 tenets of design thinking that have great implication for us in looking at speed, scale, and scope. First and foremost, putting people first by identifying and observing what they need and want, even if they can't articulate it. And many of the IDEO projects start with teams going on the ground, just watching, just seeing what people do and what they have trouble with, and often leading them to strategies that they wouldn't have discovered otherwise. The second one, and this will sound familiar, is embracing constraints as a source of creativity. Third, seeding platforms for change, thinking through all the levers that are needed to bring a plan to results, all those steps in between, the theme of your conference this year. And often, as we know in energy, that really amounts to a lot more than energy or information only. I was thinking of a great example with the British chef Jamie Oliver, who you may have heard came to the United States recently, to some controversy I might add, to see how he could improve the food being served in a number of schools, much to the opposition of some school boards, some of the kids, and some of the school cooks, you know, who were worried about having to make all these changes, who were worried about cost, and wanted to give kids the food they wanted, chicken nuggets being a prime example. And so Jamie Oliver decided that he would take it right to the root of the problem, and he got about a dozen grade school kids in a room, and he showed them how many conventional nuggets are made, not all. He took all those leftover parts of chicken that we do not normally see and we don't want to see, and he ground them up into this really awful, yucky-looking paste. And you can imagine the kids are just groaning, covering their eyes, and making all kinds of sounds, totally repulsed by it. And then he said, "So who wants chicken nuggets for lunch?" And they all raised their hands. It takes more than information sometimes. It takes whole platforms for change. And then finally, IDEO recommends to let your ideas go into the world to propagate change. And they're doing that themselves. You can download their own toolkit. You can go to their website for an openideo.org, where a lot of people around the world are collaborating and sharing ideas on change. You know, I mentioned Nike and the textile factory. The reason why they decided to share patents and intellectual property, and a number of other companies too, is because they looked at the whole ecosystem of change around the world that they would need to address the getting waste and energy and toxics out of the stream. They couldn't do it alone. They really had to work with others, and they wanted to do it with others, and it's really quite a success so far. That's why I love the C40 Cities program that is on your agenda as well, all about creating a platform or sharing the best ideas and getting it out there in areas that need it the most. So which is more important, hard or soft technology? Both, of course. But the new thing really is integrating the two so that we design smart technologies for human behavior.